Welcome to the Trent England Show. Thanks for watching. To be or not to be like Texas. It seems like that's a big part of the debate over teacher pay and education funding in Oklahoma, and we're going to get to that in just a minute because a lot of the talk about that leaves out the rest of the story. I'm going to channel a great radio figure of the past in a couple of minutes. I'm going to give you the rest of the story on that, but we got to start off. I've got three great stories because, hey, I grew up during the Cold War. I know for some millennials, they go, what was it? Was that the last ice age? No. I've got three stories about the Russians and the socialists that I've got to get to real quick before we get to Texas. But let's start with the Trump administration and Russia. Let's start with that one because this is going to be the most downplayed story of the day, I predict, because it is a Russia Trump story that doesn't follow the mainstream media narrative. The Trump administration kicking out 60 Russian diplomats, shuttering the Russian consulate in Seattle, all as part of the worldwide blowback against Russia using nerve gas to assassinate a former spy and his daughter and attempt to assassinate them. Also put a police officer in the hospital in Great Britain. I've mentioned it on the show before. I think that's an important story. I think that what is going on in Russia is actually important to the future of the United States and the future of world stability, and the Trump administration joining Ukraine, Latvia, Estonia, Great Britain, countries all around the world in booting out some Russian diplomats as a public way to express discontent. Of course, we hope that there are more serious things actually happening behind the scenes. So that is our report on Russia. What about the British Socialist Labour Party? Jeremy Corbyn, he is under fire today in Great Britain for anti-Semitism. The British Labour Party has had a string of incidents of party leaders involved in spreading anti-Semitic material on social media. That's where Jeremy Corbyn has got linked into all of this, because he was supporting in a social media comment an artist who had put together an anti-Semitic mural, and Jeremy Corbyn's supportive comment on all of this was uncovered recently, and he is under fire even today with sort of dueling letters from different Jewish groups in Great Britain over what it all means. But again, I think an important story. You know, it's fascinating too. One of the arguments, the responses that some of the Labour Party folks have had in Britain, of course, this is like the Democratic Party in the United States, only with a further leftist tilt. Jeremy Corbyn is like Bernie Sanders, only he likes to spend even more time hanging out, has liked to spend more time in his past hanging out with terrorists, Hezbollah, people like that. But one of the fascinating things is their response is, well, there's a lot more anti-Semitism on the right, so they say. The fascinating thing is, sure, you can find pockets of nuts in any political movement, in any political party. On the right, you find the anti-Semites out there isolated because they're not in leadership, they're shunned. This is true in Britain, this is true in the United States. The Labour Party, it's in their leadership, it's in the leadership of the Labour Party in Britain where you have these scandals with people spreading anti-Semitic rhetoric and propaganda. I think that is interesting to say the least. Okay, third story, right here in Oklahoma, the socialists, the honest to goodness World Socialist website is panning the Oklahoma Education Association's demands because what? Number one, it doesn't go far enough, and number two, some of the taxes proposed by the OEA are regressive. So the socialists are actually bashing the Oklahoma Education Association's demands right here in Oklahoma. Okay, so those are our three stories that just make me feel like I'm a kid again, living in the 1980s. Okay, let's get to the Red River rivalry. We're told that we have teachers fleeing Oklahoma, you know, like they're trying to get out of East Germany back when I was a kid, right? And they're crossing the Red River into Texas because teacher pay is higher in Texas. And so we've got to raise teacher pay here in Oklahoma so that we can keep teachers here in Oklahoma. And look, I think we should raise teacher pay. I think some of this argument makes sense, but why stop there? I mean, why not tell the rest of the story? There are a whole bunch of pieces of this story that are always left out. Did you know that the minimum teacher pay in Texas is lower than the minimum teacher pay in Oklahoma? Did you know that? Let me say it again. Minimum teacher pay in Texas is lower than minimum teacher pay in Oklahoma. But local school districts in Texas actually use their power, and they are more empowered to pay teachers more because they have more access to property taxes. They have less funding silos in Texas. We talked about that last week. We talked about what needs to happen here in Oklahoma to break down some of these silos. I actually have a piece in the Tulsa World that ran on Saturday that talks about the funding silo problem and breaking some of those things down. And in Texas, they actually give local school districts that power to do that, which is why even though minimum teacher pay in Texas is lower than it is in Oklahoma, they're able to pay teachers more. You know, the other thing that is so disingenuous, this gets peddled all the time, is, well, you know, average teacher pay in Oklahoma is whatever, but if you go down to Denton, Texas, you can make $15,000 more. Well, sure thing. I mean, average pay in any job in statewide in Oklahoma is going to be lower than the same job in Denton, Texas, right? Or in downtown Houston, right? We know that, I mean, it's just like average pay for most jobs in Oklahoma City or Tulsa is going to be higher than it is in Lawton or in Chickasha or wherever, right? The cost of living is higher in the cities. We know that, right? I mean, I feel like we've been talking about cost of living on the show quite a bit, but we're just trying to pour some common sense into this debate over teacher pay. One of the reasons why the comparison is, you know, looks so stark when people compare Oklahoma to Texas, they cherry pick these high-paying districts in Texas. Now, how are they able to pay teachers so much in those high-paying districts? Again, it is property taxes. And this is why it makes some sense to focus on property taxes in particular as the mechanism for teacher pay. One reason is property taxes are very stable. Right? I mean, that's why they use property taxes for bonds. Think about it, right? They go out, they say, we want to build a building, we're going to borrow a bunch of money, and we're going to pay that back using property taxes. Why property taxes? Because it's very stable, it's very predictable, and if we have things like salaries for people in something like a public school system where we're making essentially long-term commitments, right? It's not quite the same as it is to bondholders, but shouldn't we look at it almost in the same way? It makes sense to tie that not to gross production taxes, not to cigarette taxes, not even to sales taxes, but to tie that to the land, right? To tie that to property taxes makes all kind of sense. And it makes even more sense when you think about the fact that where are property values higher? Property values are higher where cost of living is higher, right? And so you need to pay teachers more in a place where the cost of living is higher because buying a house there is more expensive. But if you base it on property taxes, then the fact that houses cost more in that area also mean that you have more revenue. I had somebody on, you know, one of these pastors for OK Kids, right? They're defending a system for average kids, but they don't want to help any other kids. I had one of these people telling me last week, well, I don't want more access to property taxes because it'll create inequality. Well, look, we already have inequality. What you need is to be able to pay teachers the market wage for wherever they happen to be, and if that's in a high-rent district, so to speak, right? If you base it on property taxes, that gives you more revenue. This just makes sense. This makes common sense. This is how it works in Texas. Nobody should make the Oklahoma-Texas comparison and push that in our faces unless they're willing to follow the next step, right? Unless they're willing to follow the rest of the story and make some of the changes here in Oklahoma that will allow us to actually compete with Texas. Okay, last point, you know I'm going to bring it up, right? I mean, at least if you watch the show often enough, you know I'm going to point to the fact that Oklahoma has no income tax. Texas, sorry. Oklahoma should have no income tax. Texas has no income tax. Texas has no capital gains tax, right? I mean, if we want to look at Texas and look at the fact that they're able to pay teachers more in most Texas school districts, we should also look at the fact that, look, they're not doing that at the state level. They actually have a state government with no income tax, no capital gains tax, and they're empowering local districts to do that. I think we should do the same thing in Oklahoma. Actually, the Oklahoma Council of Public Affairs has been pushing for the same kind of reforms in Oklahoma for 25 years, right? Get rid of the state income tax, make ourselves more competitive with Texas, empower local communities to fund their schools, empower local communities to make more decisions on their own, of the kinds that local communities should make, right? We're not going to become a place that is lawless, right? You still impose rights protections, civil rights protections otherwise in local communities. You don't let people violate other people's property rights just because some town wants to do that, right? But when it comes to budgeting for local schools, paying local teachers, local control makes a lot of sense. Okay, so if we want to be like Texas, we should actually look at how they fund their schools and how they fund teacher salaries there. Last story of the day. This one caught my eye. This one makes me crazy. Barack Obama and I think I put it in the show description for today, I am going to compare Barack Obama to Mickey Mouse, but it has nothing to do with physical appearance at all. It has to do with a lesson that Mickey Mouse learned in one of my favorite Disney cartoons. Did you see Barack Obama was giving a speech in Japan, and he said what he would like to do, what he wants to use his foundation to do, unlike the Clinton Foundation. He doesn't want to just launder money and try to get his wife elected president. What Barack Obama wants to do, he said he wants to create hundreds or thousands or millions of young Barack Obamas and Michelle Obamas. He said the problems in our world are really mostly caused by old men, and he wants to create millions of young Barack and Michelle Obamas. Okay, let's step back and think about this for just a minute. Barack Obama, who really is Barack Obama? I mean, we feel like we know him, but let's go through the record, right? He was a bench warmer in the Illinois State Senate, right? He was somebody in the Illinois legislature who basically did nothing, walked lots of votes, right? He sacrificed his ability to make change in order to set himself up to gain more political power. He did the same thing in the United States Senate, right? And go out and ask people who support Obama, ask people who voted for Obama, right? And they still, I mean, everybody acknowledges this, right? He was biding his time. He was building his narrative story, right? So no accomplishments basically in Illinois, no real accomplishments in the United States Senate. And then when he got elected president, what did he do? He alienated Congress, right? He could barely get his signature health care measure through. It was a package of compromise passed in a shady, at least, way, right? That has never been stable, has never been popular. And other than that, he alienated his own party in Congress. He alienated the other party in Congress. He never had the ability to work across the aisle, really, with almost anybody. He lost seats for his own party over and over and over again, not just seats at the national level, but state legislatures, governorships, right? I mean, the Democratic Party has seen not just one wave, but multiple waves washing them out of governance in the states. Right? That is the legacy. And finally, what did he do? He paved the way for Donald Trump, which a lot of people on the left, pretty much everybody on the left, and a lot of people on the right are upset about, right? And Barack Obama did that through his elitism that just infected the political discourse. That's my opinion, but I think a lot of people agree with that. But he checked the boxes, of course. What did Barack Obama do? He checked the boxes. He got himself elected president. I mean, that's no small thing. He got a Nobel Peace Prize for doing nothing at all, right? I mean, nothing. And he has lots of social media followers, which is probably the most important of all of those things to a lot of people today. He's a celebrity, right? So he attained celebrity status based basically on what? Based on his own good intentions. I want to close the show by talking about that, because it seems to me that that sums up who Barack and Michelle Obama are, right? They are people who have gotten through life based on their own good intentions and their ability to project their good intentions and parlay their good intentions into political power. And now he's out there talking about creating millions of young people, millions of young Americans who follow in those footsteps, and it is a disaster, right? You remember The Sorcerer's Apprentice? I love that cartoon, right? The Sorcerer's Apprentice, the young sorcerer, the young apprentice, Mickey Mouse, and he's got this power, and he decides that he should use this power to, create somebody to help him out, to do what he wants, create something sort of in his own image. But what happens, right? He doesn't. It's just based on his own good intentions. It's not based on wisdom. It's not based on him really understanding how that power works, and it all goes astray. And who does he rely on? He relies on an old man, the actual sorcerer, to come in and clean things up for Mickey Mouse, because Mickey Mouse is so excited about the power that he has, and he believes so much in his own good intentions that he never stops to check that power, right? And he never stops to think about the actual the actual authority and the rules and all of that. Look. Here is my advice to young people, right, who might be enamored by all of this, Barack Obama and the Grecian temples and all of this that we got to see over the 8 years of the Obama presidency and the Obama campaigns, right? None of us should ever judge. This is my advice. Don't judge yourself based on your own good intentions, and never ask anybody else to judge you based on your own good intentions. That is a slippery slope downward into wallowing in good intentions without ever actually doing anything. Without ever actually, it's a kind of a a veneer that can make people feel superficially satisfied with themselves without ever filling out their core with anything of substance, right? Never justify yourself based on your own good intentions in your own mind or to anybody else. Instead, judge yourself based on results. Seek good results. Do things that produce good results, even very small things and even very small results. It's the results that matter. Good intentions are a dime a dozen. Good intentions are essentially irrelevant. And never assume that anybody else's intentions or anything as less than as good and as grand as your own. I see this all the time in political discourse, and it makes me crazy. People say, well, that person, they want something less than what I want. That person is, they're only doing that because of this or that. You see this in the gun debate all the time, right? I mean, politicians, they just vote against gun control because they get money from the NRA. No, they get money from the NRA because they believe in the Second Amendment, right? And if you can't, if you're out there, for the kids who are out there who marched in this, in the various rallies that they had on Sunday, right? If they can't go out and have a debate with somebody, and have a discussion with somebody who honestly, earnestly believes in the Second Amendment, then they're going to lose, right? And they should lose. They should lose on the merits, but they're going to lose just because they don't have the respect of people with whom they disagree, right, to have a real conversation. And I saw this was in the Oklahoman even over the weekend, right, this idea that, well, the only reason why they don't get their way is because other people are bought off. And it's Boulder Dash, and everybody knows it's Boulder Dash who is actually, mature enough to have a real conversation. Finally, young people should understand, and this gets into the realm of public policy and our personal lives, that degrees and awards, even Nobel Peace Prizes, even getting elected president, right, those are not real accomplishments, right? Those are certificates. Those are, those are things that give us accolades and and might buy us celebrity status. But what really matters are the results that we create in our lives. What really matters is what you do with the degree, what you do after you get the award, or what you did to get it, right? Barack Obama's Nobel Peace Prize is irrelevant because he did nothing to earn it, right? It's meaningless. It's a joke. It's a joke that people on late night TV who support Obama crack jokes about the fact that he got a Nobel Peace Prize because it doesn't mean anything, right? We should judge ourselves based on our own good intentions, whether we're on the left or on the right. I hope that Barack Obama fails in his quest to create millions of Barack and Michelle Obamas, because what we need in the United States and all around the world are people who focus on substance, people who have the humility to go out and actually really do things that matter and judge themselves based on their own real accomplishments, based on the results, not just on their own smarmy sense of their own good intentions, which we see way too much of in politics today. And look, if you see me doing that, call me on it. And if I see you doing it on social media, I'm going to call you on it too, because it drives me crazy. You can't have a real debate if everybody's just debating who has better intentions, right? That's mindless, it's meaningless, and it's obnoxious. I'm Trent England. Thank you for watching the show today. We're going to get the links to the stories I talked about put up on Facebook and on YouTube. I always try to go within the hour or so after we wrap up the live broadcast here and post our show notes, the stories and the links in the comments on Facebook and on YouTube. You can subscribe on YouTube. You can subscribe on iTunes. You can find us on SoundCloud. Of course, we're on Facebook. You can interact with me, send me messages, your thoughts on Facebook. And of course, the show archive, including the radio archives, is all up at ocpathink.org, ocpathink.org. We've got some new data tools coming on the ocpathink.org website, by the way. I'll tell you about those the moment they go live here on The Trent England Show. Again, thanks for watching.